Hi kids, this is Dr. Aruna Bhargava's Kids Satsang with Nani, and this is continuation of our Bhagwadgita series, Bhagwadgita Part 3. But before we begin, I want to tell you something very important. As you go out in this world, you will meet people who will talk in terms of my God and your God, and even my God is better than your God. Now, I want you to remember that there is only one God. You'll be surprised to know how many grown-ups even believe some variety of this statement. Unfortunately, many wars have been fought and acts of terrorism committed because of this belief that my God is better than your God. But I want to tell you kids, there's only one God, and people of different religions call him by different names, but there is only one God. He is light and love and is everywhere and all-powerful and all-knowing. He can come in human form sometimes to help people, but God is essentially without form. God is spirit. And this all-powerful God comes and lives in your heart as your very best friend because he loves you. And in this satsang, we call him Bhagwanji. Okay, now let's continue with our Bhagavad Gita series. As I had told you before, Bhagavad Gita is to Hindus what Bible is to Christians. And it is a moral compass, a powerful teaching for us. You know, it gives you guidelines how to live a most meaningful and beautiful life. We took one stanza, one shloka, from the Bhagavad Gita, and let me repeat it so you can hear the Sanskrit words and get used to that, become familiar with it, and then I'll explain it to you. Now, it says, Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadi kim prabhaseta kim asita vrajeta kim. Now, this means, what is the nature of a person of steady wisdom and firm resolve? And how does he walk? How does he talk? How does he sit? In other words, what does he like so I can be like him? Now this, as I explained before in the previous satsang, for those who are new, I'll briefly tell you, the entire Bhagavad Gita takes place right in the middle of a battlefield. A huge battlefield, two armies arrayed against each other. These are two sets of cousins. Pandavas are the good guys, Kauravas are the bad guys. The story is a long one as to what brought them to this point. That will be the topic of another satsang. But here, there are two armies ready to fight. And right in the middle of these two armies comes a chariot with two handsome young men. One is Lord Krishna, who is the charioteer, and the other one standing in the chariot is Arjuna with a bow and arrow and a brave warrior. But at this time, seeing all his cousins and his relatives, he loses heart. He drops his bow down and says to Lord Krishna, I will not fight. At this time, the entire Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explains to Arjuna, and it's a question answer. And we are going to take just this one shloka and explain to you some of the guidelines of a person of steady wisdom and firm resolve. Krishna says to him, Arjuna, become a person of steady wisdom and firm resolve. And Arjuna says, please explain to me the qualities of such a person. In the Bhagavad Gita part 1, I told you the first quality that the Lord Krishna mentions. That is, he says, don't become an emotional yo-yo. Don't get upset because somebody is angry with you, and don't be extremely elated because somebody praises you. Be steady and calm and firm with belief, strong belief in yourself, and you don't have to, be an emotional yo-yo and giving power to somebody else to make you feel good or bad. Number 2, he says, become the boss of your own senses. You have 5 senses. Don't let these senses rule you. You control the senses. Third one that we're going to talk about today is a very important one, in which Lord Krishna says, keep your mind focused on Bhagwanji or God at all times. Keep your mind focused on God at all times. No matter what you're doing, one part of your mind should be focused on God. So let's see what else we need here. He says, what does Lord Krishna mean by this statement? Focus your mind firmly on God. It means give Him all your worries and problems. Lean on Him. Let Him help you. Don't take all the pressure of solving all your problems all by yourself. You can't do it. Learn to pray and learn to trust God. We must practice keeping a small part of our mind focused on God while we are doing our day-to-day work. Even when our minds are engaged in some problem solving in school, a small part of our mind should be focused on God. We must practice always being connected to God with a thin cord all times, no matter what we're doing. Secondly, as soon as we have a problem, we should pray and ask God to help us solve it, rather than banging our head against the wall and struggling and thinking that we can do it all by ourselves. Once we have God or Bhagwanji on our side, solving the problem becomes much easier. Give Him your worries, and you sleep easy. This is what is meant by keeping your mind focused on God at all times. Know that there are bound to be problems in this world. Problems will come at some time or the other. No one is immune to pain or insulated from suffering. And no one gets to skate through life's problem as a problem-free, However, with God on our side as a helper, these same problems and suffering becomes lighter and easier to bear. They also become easier to resolve. In fact, when we have problem, we come closer to God. We remember Him and pray to Him. When things are going well, sometimes we forget all about God. So, when we practice keeping our mind focused on God, we learn to hear His voice, okay? We learn to hear His voice. So, now let me tell you, you kids like stories, right? So let me tell you a story. This is a true story. Lisa always had the habit of speeding at traffic lights. As soon as it turned green, off she went. One day she had stopped at a traffic light. As soon as it turned green, she started to immediately speed up. But she heard a loud voice in her head that said, "Stop!" She immediately jammed her brakes. Barely a second later, a speeding truck that had ignored the red light barreled through the intersection, just a few feet in front of her car. She knew that it was the voice of God within her that had saved her life. That is why always keep a small part of your mind focused on God. Let me tell you another story. One Sunday morning in the early hours, a phone rang shrilly. The voice on the phone informed the mother that her son Gary had gotten into a serious car accident and had been taken to the hospital in a critical condition. She and her husband rushed to the hospital. On their way to the hospital, they passed the scene of the accident. The two cars were badly damaged and there was broken glass all over the place. Upon arriving at the local hospital, the doctor told them that Gary's injuries were very serious and that he was in critical condition. And there was very little hope. The parents prayed, and now I'm telling you about the power of prayer. They asked all their friends and their relatives and the large circle through the internet. They got people to pray, and day and night people prayed for Gary, and a miracle happened. Even Gary, within a few days, all the tubes that were in Gary were removed. He was able to sit up in a chair. The surgery on his nose was completed. The next day he was able to go in a wheelchair and move around in the hospital in a wheelchair. And after a few days, he was able to go home. The doctors were all surprised at the speed of his recovery. The family and friends never stopped praying until Gary was fully recovered. Prayer is very powerful. But for that to work, we have to be connected with Bhagwanji. for prayers to work, we have to have a relationship with Bhagwanji. So there are innumerable incidents where when you are connected with God, He talks to you and He helps you and you're always protected. So today is our third satsang of Bhagwadgita, part 3, with this one shloka. What is a person of firm resolve and steady wisdom like? Number one, he is not an emotional yo-yo. Okay, his emotions don't go up and down. Secondly, he is a boss of his senses. He does not allow the senses to control him. Number 3, the person of firm resolve has his or her mind constantly focused on God. One small part of the mind constantly focused on God has a close relationship with Bhagwanji, so that in times of need you can hear His voice. Remember to pray and thank to Bhagwanji before you go to bed at night, and remember Bhagwanji first thing in the morning. That's all He wants of you, to be there for you at all times. Namaste kids, I love you, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.